To another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Super Mario Bros. 2, also known as Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, for the Super Nintendo via the Super Mario All-Stars Collection. The original Super Mario Bros. 2 was deemed too similar and too difficult to the original Mario Bros. When it was being considered to be brought over to North America. Instead, of course, we got the awesome Super Mario Bros. 2 that we know and love today, but the original Mario 2 wouldn't see release in the US until this version on Super Mario Bros. All-Stars. The game is notoriously difficult for good reason, but there is some cool stuff about it. There is no two-player mode in the game. You can only play as either Mario or Luigi separately, which was the first time that you were able to actually do this. Normally, to play as Luigi, you would have to do a two-player game in the original Mario Bros. There is differences, though, between Mario and Luigi, with Luigi having a little bit less traction, but is able to jump higher. Because of this, Luigi is actually, I think, a little bit easier to use in this particular game, and also in this version, I feel that the movement and the overall momentum is done in a way that ends up making the game a tad bit easier than its NES counterpart. That's not to say that the game still isn't hard, because it is, but still a little bit easier than that version. The game is set up very similarly to the original Mario Bros. With the same styles of levels. The only things really thrown into the mix was a different type of spring, where you could really get a huge amount of air via springs, and you have to kind of master this later on in the game, as well as wind becomes a factor. In certain levels there will be wind going that will end up pushing you in directions, making jumping and platforming a bit more challenging as you try to progress. Mario Lost Levels, or Mario 2, also has a lot more tricks up its sleeve than the original Mario Bros. It does still have warp zones, but some of the warp zones that you can end up finding will actually warp you back to previous worlds instead of actually moving you forward. There's also the introduction of the poison mushrooms, which in the original version of Mario 2 were a little bit hard to differentiate. They looked very similar to the ones from the original Mario Bros., just with a slightly darker color to them, which eventually they ended up changing up into the purple version of the mushrooms to better signify that they were poisonous. The game also includes a lot more maze-like levels that you either have to go through the right paths or go through the right pipes in order to find your way through. One of the cool added additions to this version of Super Mario The Lost Levels is that the game actually contains more than just the 8 normal worlds. In the original Mario 2, there was actually 5 bonus worlds, worlds 9, A, B, C, and D, and these automatically become accessed once you complete the main game for the first time here. So once we beat the 8th world, we'll automatically be able to move on to world 9. Some of those levels in those bonus worlds aren't too bad, but there's a couple of really tricky ones near the very end. After defeating Bowser at the end, of course, of each of the worlds, you get greeted by a toad in a bag, and just like Mario 1 version of All-Stars, there's a different amount of toads depending upon what world you complete. Well, up until World 8, when you save the princess. World 9, A, B, and C, and D just use other versions of the toads in the bags that we found during the main, normal numbered levels. There also seems to be less power-ups in this version as far as getting mushrooms and then eventually the fire flower, so keeping a hold of the fire ability is essential for getting through some of the harder levels. World 2 introduces us to the other version of the springs that, as you can see, when I hit one of those springs, it launched me way up into the air, and if you have good momentum going into the jump on the spring, you'll go pretty far before you end up falling. The problem is, later on in the game, there's a lot of pits after these springs that you'll have to jump over, and you have to time it right so that you don't end up falling back from the top of the screen directly into a pit. Due to Luigi's higher jump, I'm able to take a little bit more risk as far as landing on certain platforms. There are plenty of Piranha Plants that unfortunately you can't jump over as Mario, but you actually can jump over them easily as Luigi because his jump being so much higher. Here we have to find a couple of hidden blocks in order to get up to the Piranha Plant pipe at the top, and then we can continue on through the stage like normal. You'll also notice a lot of tricky ends to levels throughout Mario 2 before we end up reaching the flagpole, and it's actually a lot easier in Mario 2 The Lost Levels to get past the flagpole, and in fact, in one point when you're able to get past the flagpole and keep going, you'll actually make it to a warp zone. Fortunately, the warp zone ends up taking you back to the first world of the game, though. World 2-3 is one of my favorite styles of levels in Mario, Classic Mario, and that is the bridge levels that feature Cheep Cheeps coming up from the bottom, because I always feel a need to run as fast as I possibly can during these areas, trying to keep that momentum at all times. There's also a lot of areas in the game where you'll have to bounce off of enemies, time it right so that you'll be able to spring off and be able to land on different platforms that way. As we begin the next castle, you have to be careful when you drop down here to land on the platform safely, as we're going to knock out a couple of Goombas with fireballs. If you don't have the fireballs, of course, you want to just let them fall into the lava before you end up attempting to go through there. Now, right here, we're just going to run underneath a lot of the fireballs. Since we are small, I can just kind of get underneath a lot of them. Also, even if you are larger Luigi or Mario, you can actually duck a lot underneath the fireballs in order to kind of just barely sneak by without getting hit. You'll see that as I get a little bit farther into the game. World 3 is the first of the snow levels and also introduces the Hammer Brothers for this game, which can be a little bit difficult. We're going to wait kind of right underneath of them, waiting for the right moment to quickly run past. The Hammer Brothers are just as annoying as they were in Mario 1. In fact, probably even more so in Mario 2 or Lost Levels, just because there's more of an abundance of them throughout a couple of the more difficult levels. Right here, I'm going to hit this block in order to find myself a mushroom, though it's a little bit tricky to kind of get around all the bullet bills coming my way during this section. Here we have one of those giant springy springs that can send us over the flagpole, but we're not going to go that way. Instead, just hit the flagpole and finish up the level. (3-2) is the first of the underwater-based levels, and these, for the most part, are pretty straightforward, have bloopers, Cheep Cheeps, and of course the big openings at the bottom that will try to suck you underneath and end up causing you to lose a life that way. It's always a little bit difficult to kind of maneuver around the Cheep Cheeps, and more specifically the bloopers, just because their path can be a little bit more sporadic. Relatively an easy first underwater level for us, but there will be more challenging ones a little bit farther on in the game. (3-3) takes us back up into the treetops. Lots of Koopa Troopas were near the very beginning of the level. Overall, though, nothing really too complicated, just a lot of nicely timed jumps that we'll be able to make. I love being able to play as Luigi during these stages, just because you're able to make such a decent distance as far as your jumps are concerned. (3-4) is the first of the maze-like castles in the game. Start off by running on the bottom portion of this area. We're going to intentionally get hit by this Piranha Plant because we need to be small to run underneath this area. There is a hidden mushroom, though. You can get that, still go along this bottom part here. Once near these Piranha Plants, take the top path, and then what you're going to want to do is find a hidden block, and this will allow you to get back up to that top platform and run along the top portion here. Gotta be a little bit cautious of the rotating flames, but land safely here and then finish up by jumping over Bowser. Just like with 4-1 in Mario 1, 4-1 in Mario 2 here has Lakitus trying to drop down the Spinies on top of us. Try to keep ahead of them as much as possible. Gotta be careful using the spring to get over the watery gap before we run into another Lakitu, which thankfully we can end up jumping on. The hit detection as far as jumping on enemies is concerned is a little bit laxed in the classic Mario games. It's something that you may end up seeing a hit against an enemy that looks like that probably shouldn't have worked, but it ends up working, and most of the time in your favor. 4-2 has us running headfirst into bullet bills that are waiting for us at the very beginning of the stage. Take the upper path using the spring before battling another Lakitu, trying to keep ahead of them as much as possible. From this point on, we start to have a lot of the Piranha Plants that are the red ones that pop out of the pipes. These are ones that come out no matter what. Even if you're standing on top, they're going to come out, and they don't stop coming out even if you're close to the pipe. So you always have to keep that in mind. Pretty much from this point on in the game, we see almost nothing but those. Four 3 is another one of the treetop style levels. Use the spring at the beginning to kind of get our way up to the girders. After jumping on a couple of them, there's one moving at the bottom coming up that you can use in order to get a fire flower or mushroom. We're just going to go ahead and just keep on moving. About halfway through the level, bullet bills start coming our way. Going to stay near the bottom part of the screen and make our way up these couple of single platforms in order to finish up the level. At the beginning of 4-4, go to the bottom of the stairs before running over to the right. We're going to be able to get a fire flower or mushroom out of this set of blocks here. There's a few large rotating flames during the course of the stage, so you have to be careful of them. Here, we have to wait for the fire to kind of go around and then jump up to the top portion here. You can either wait for the Koopa Troopers to go by or try to risk it by jumping up like I did. Take out the Hammer Brother using hopefully the fire flower that you have left, or you'll have to make a tricky jump. And then you're going to want to drop all the way to the bottom here to run across the bottom. It's a bit hard to do, but that's what you're going to need to do in order to continue on here in the level. Once over to the Bowser, we're going to take him out using the Fire Flower ability, hitting the axe, and moving on to World 5. "5-1 is another one of the snow worlds, starting out with a bunch of the busy beetles before going through a series of pipes with the red piranha plants coming out from the top portion, so you have to be careful running underneath of them. Not too far after that, though, we have a couple of Goombas before we hit this platform where we have to use the wind in order to help us propel ourselves over the platforms. This section here, we're going to use our Fire Flower ability to take out both of the Piranha Plants before heading on through between the pipes, which can be easier said than done, just trying to make those little jumps in between those pipes. At the end, you'll have to do a pretty big leap onto the center platform and then jump over a series of Koopa Troopas, and then when you make it to the very end, find the hidden blocks in order to get to the very top, which will take you, thankfully, to the flag. As the next level begins, we drop on down to another underground area. If you have a mushroom or whatever, you can kind of use that to help you get to the top portion. And like always in these levels, we're just going to cheat a little bit by going along the ceiling, which is very easy to do so, of course, in this level. A little bit way through, you have to make kind of a couple of jumps on the up and down moving platforms. At the end, a couple of them are just moving down, so we end up having to jump along these little platforms here underneath the Piranha Plant and make it to the end of the stage. 5-3 is a little bit of a weird level. Start off by jumping over here, and then you want to make sure you get up to this pipe and head on down. It's a bit of a maze, and the level will actually start to loop over and over again if you don't end up making it through this pipe. Once you pop out of the pipe, though, you'll be able to continue the rest of the stage. Afterwards, be cautious, though, of bullet bills that will start to travel in your direction. Land safely on the small moving back and forth platform, and then continue along until eventually you hit the flag and move on to the castle. As 5-4 begins, we have a couple of small jumps we have to make. You can duck underneath this rotating flame so that you don't end up getting hit by it. It looks like it'll probably hit you, but thankfully Luigi's head while ducking doesn't quite count as actually hitting his body. Use the platforms to get to the top portion and kind of get over this rotating fire. I usually end up getting hit, unfortunately, like that there. The rest of the level is relatively straightforward. You just have a lot of rotating flames, and thankfully, since we're already small, it's pretty easy to deal with them. At the end, there's a little bit of a crowded platform with Bowser, but we're going to run underneath, hit the axe, and move on to World 6. As 6-1 begins, run underneath the first handful of platforms and continue on to the main part of the stage where a Hammer Brother will meet us. You have to be very quick though. You want to make sure that you're able to hit the hidden block and get over before that Hammer Brother ends up catching up to you. We're going to use that next platform to boost over, and then we're going to hit this one here in order to get the mushroom to come down. Thankfully, we're able to get past the Piranha Plants in order to get the mushroom, and then use the wind to help us get over the next little bit of platforms. There's a lot of Piranha Plants during the course of the stage, but thankfully, eventually, we make it to the flag and move on to 6-2. (6-2) is another one of the underwater levels, and as we begin, start moving over to the right, watch out for a couple of bloopers. Make sure we don't get pulled down into the abyss below. It's a little bit crowded here, so we have to be careful. Thankfully, we have a little bit of leeway with our large sprite of Luigi that we're able to kind of get underneath of the bloopers as they kind of move up a little bit. Continuing on along the level, try to work our way through, take the upper path at all times. This gives us more space to work with and less opportunity for us to get kind of pulled down below. The hardest part about these areas is when you hit your head, it causes you to kind of bounce off briefly, which is just enough sometimes to pull you underneath as long as you're not mashing the swim button. (6-3) is another one of my personal favorite levels in the game. It's another one of the bridge-themed stages with a lot of cheap-cheeps coming up from underneath. A lot of small platforms. You can get a mushroom from that block there if you want to, but it's a little bit hard to do so because you have to jump off the Koopa Troopa. But we're going to continue along the stage, just moving between the platforms and using the enemies when we can in order to kind of bounce our way up and slow down just a bit to make the next upcoming jumps. As 6-4 begins, jump to the small little platform right next to us and then use that to leap over. Wait for the giant rotating flame and take the under path in order to kind of get across. After waiting a little bit for the Piranha Plant, we're then going to take the upper path here. You gotta watch out for that Hammer Brother in order to continue along here. Once we drop down the next section, run underneath, go between the Piranha Plant pipes, up here, and then onto the very small moving back and forth platform. When you make it to the conveyor belts, you have to go to the very bottom layer and run across here. Unfortunately, I run into the rotating flame. Either way, once we make it to the next section, we have another small moving platform, dodging out for flames, and then get past Bowser in order to hit the axe. Seven -1 is another one of the night levels, starting off with some wind that's going to push us to the right side here. Try to get in between all of the Piranha Plants. Like I said, there's a lot of the red Piranha Plants that are going to try to grab us throughout the rest of the game, and these guys are pretty annoying. A little bit ways into the level, we will run into some Hammer Brothers, which can be annoying. I'm going to take the bottom path since that's not where they are. You never know where they're going to spawn, either the top, middle, or bottom layer. Take care of them, and then continue over to the right. Right after this plant, though, there is another Hammer Brother coming down the stairs. Thankfully, because of Luigi's big jump, I'm able to kind of jump over him. He jumps up into me, but either way, that's the end of the level, and we're moving on to 7-2. (7-2) is another one of the maze-like levels, and we're going to use that to our advantage. And the way we're going to do that is by hitting this question mark block in order to get the mushroom. And then we're going to continue along the moving platform. We need to get to the pipe, but instead of going right there, just keep going to the right, and this will loop back around to another one of the question mark blocks, in which case we can then power ourselves up to the Fire Flower Luigi. Then we're going to jump up to the top and use the pipe to go down to the next part of the level. Next section of the stage is relatively straightforward. Heading over to the right, watch out for the Lakitu, which we can easily jump to. Since we are Luigi, we can just kind of like immediately jump on top of the Lakitu and just kind of get past him. Do the same on the next one, or duck underneath of him as we're traveling through and finishing up the level. You do have to wait a little bit for this Koopa Troopa to go up, but we can bounce off, hit this, and then immediately to the pipe, jumping to the flag, and moving on to 7-3. (7-3) begins, and it's another one of the wind-based levels. We're going to hit the first of the springs and kind of move really far into the right. This is one of those levels where you kind of have to start getting the best of the springs, knowing about how far you can go before you end up falling back down from the top of the screen in order to land safely on the other platforms. This level is pretty tricky, but it's just good practice for a level that we're going to have later on in the game, which is even more rough to try to get through. It is kind of a cool concept, though, of using the springs to kind of really help you boost your way through the course of the level. After hitting the spring, we're going to land safely here. We have a couple of rotating flames, which can be a bit of a trouble spot, for sure, as we continue through the level until we hit the flag and move on to 7-4 and the 7th World Castle. As 7-4 begins, watch out for the first rotating flame. You may have to wait for it to kind of go around a couple of times before we run over it. And then we're going to wait for the moving platform below to drop down so that we can land safely. And then we have a couple of conveyor belts moving up and down, making our way across to the other side. Once here, as you can notice, this is pretty much the identical level that we did earlier. Gotta wait for the flame and then go across. We're going to use our fireballs to help us out. Not dropping down, because we don't want to deal with the busy beetles at the bottom, and thankfully we don't have to. When you make it here, though, stand in the left corner and duck down if you're large. If you're not, you can just stand there if you're small, Mario or Luigi. And then once it goes by, then you can easily run underneath of it in order to make it to the opposite side, where we make it to the end of the level, watching out for some flames flying at us, and then finally dealing with Bowser at the end. take them out using the fire flower or just jumping over them, underneath of them, whatever you like to do, and finish up 7-4. Onwards to the 8th and final world of Super Mario 2. We still do have the bonus levels afterwards, but this is technically the 8th and final world of the normal game. Starts off with a pretty standard stage, but we do have some wind that we have to use the Koopa Troopas to bounce our way across the gap. A little bit ways in, we're going to use our Fire Flower to take out the Hammer Brother. We may have to just kind of jump over him at the right time in order to get past him normally. There's a lot of Hammer Brothers throughout the course of the rest of this part here, which can be a bit of a trouble spot, especially if you don't have the Fire Flower going in. (8-2) starts off rather normally, but it is one of the trickier maze areas of the game, mostly because of how you advance. A little bit ways through the level, you'll see the wind start to pick up, and we're going to use that to help us get across this small water gap. And then right afterwards, we're going to use a Koopa Troopa to hit this block right here to get a beanstalk to appear. This will take us up into the clouds where we will find the flag for the level and complete it. But if you don't find that block or hit it, you'll just end up looping around the level, so it's a bit tricky to do so. Probably one of the tougher spots in the game, but thus we do find it and move on to 8-3. Because we're already in the clouds, 8-3 is a cloud-based level, and there's some Lakitus and Koopa Troopas waiting for us along the way. A pretty cool overall design for the stage, though, since it is a cloud-based level. There's plenty of Hammer Brothers and other hazards along the way during the course of this stage, though. Have to use the springs, though, in order to hit us across gaps, hitting a Koopa Troopa, in order to complete the rather large pits that we have to kind of get across. When you make it here, just keep jumping until you find a hidden block. You may find a poison mushroom. Make sure that you don't accidentally grab the poison mushroom, and then use the rest of the platforms to make it to the castle. No surprise that 8-4 is another maze-like castle, since this is the final one. We're going to drop down here and then do a running jump over to the right in order to get across. Do a couple of ducks underneath of the rotating flames. When you make it over here, you have to make it to the pipe just to the right of us. To get there, though, is a little bit tricky. You're going to use the Koopa Troopa at the right moment to bounce over or jump over so that you're able to hit this pipe. Head on down, it'll take you to an underwater segment. It's a relatively brief underwater segment, similar to the one in 8-4 in the original Super Mario Bros., swimming on through, taking out a couple of bloopers along the way. There's a couple of rotating flames as well, but they're pretty easy to kind of get past. Once you come out of the pipe here, it is pretty tricky, but you're going to want to time it so that you're able to jump down safely to the pipe below and then head down this other pipe. Once you're out of the pipe down there, head over to the right side, and what you're going to want to do is just continue along the stage, watching out for the Koopa Troopas and the other enemies, landing safely on the moving platform here, and then run across the bottom, over the rotating giant flame, and this will take you to this long stretch here. Run all the way over to the very far right, and use the Koopa Troopas to help you get to this platform where you can enter into the next pipe. Once you've entered into that pipe and head out the next side, continue to the right to fight another fake Bowser. Once that Bowser is taken care of, continue along the path to the right, and this will eventually lead you to another Bowser fight. Maybe they're both real, considering the one Bowser didn't turn into an enemy, but either way, deal with the other Bowser however you want to, and then hit the axe, and you've completed Super Mario Bros. 2: The Lost Levels. Once you finish World 8 though, what's really cool is once you press start, you can continue on and move on to the next set of worlds. So we're starting off in 9-1. As the level begins, start climbing up the stairs and you'll immediately go into a pipe. It's kind of set up like a warp zone, which is kind of cool. Heading through the pipe though, you're going to be underwater, and here is an interesting level. It's very strangely set up with a lot of enemies like Koopa Troopas, busy beetles, up and down moving conveyor belt type platforms. You gotta wonder if these levels were created based on the glitch worlds of the original Mario Brothers. There's some really cool glitches, not only the minus world, but other glitches that could be set up via like manipulation of the cartridge back in the original Mario Brothers. So I always wonder if these levels were kind of like based on that a little bit. You also get to find a flagpole underneath the water to finish up 9-1, which is also kind of weird, but also cool. Nine 2 is another underwater-based level. Start off by heading over to the right. There's a like key 2 that we're going to take out using one of the fireball abilities. Keeps on swimming through the large gap. You can either swim underneath the coral here, which is a little bit risky, but if you just mash the swim button, you'll be perfectly safe. And then continue along the top portion here, watching out for this piranha plant at this pipe. Relatively short level, just like the previous one, and we'll hit the flag and move on to 9-3. As 9-3 begins, is another on-land level, which starts off with kind of a castle theme to it, but just out in the normal daytime-themed stages. Head over to the right, we're going to take the path that I'm going here, taking on this upper one, so that we're able to get across the large lava pit. And as we make it a little bit farther in, we'll have to deal with Bowser. We're not going to take him out, we're just going to jump over him, and that way we're able to reach the flagpole safely without even having to deal with him. But this is the first time we get to see Bowser in a non-final level of a stage. Nine 4 is another one of the underwater-based levels. Somehow we ended up underwater again, but it's a pretty cool level. Very easy. Actually has a phrase spelled out in Japanese for us to see as we swim above it. Very simple to kind of get through, just past the lettering, and we immediately reach the flag and move on to World A. As World A begins, watch out for the Koopa Troopas here, moving back and forth on the platforms. We're going to take the bottom path and work our way to the right. Use our Fire Flower ability to take out the different Piranha Plants coming out of the pipes. And then just to the right of that is more of the Hammer Brothers here. As you make it a little bit farther into the level, you have more Piranha Plants that we're going to have to deal with, and some Hammer Brothers on the top portion here. Use the Koopa Troopas to kind of bounce across and underneath a couple of pipes, and use the spring to bounce on over. This part is pretty tricky. You're going to want to hit each one of these Koopa Troopas, knocking them off the platforms before reaching the flag and moving on to A2. A2 is an underground themed level, and we're going to use the spring to hit this extra life free, and then use it again to kind of spring up onto the ceiling after breaking a block, grabbing the extra life and heading over to the right. You can use the bottom portion here, watching out for all the Piranha Plants popping out, and then you can kind of use the ceiling once again to run across, jumping over the platforms, moving downwards here, and make it to the pipe on the right side and move on to A3. A-3 is a cloud-based level. As we start off, we'll have the wind pick up. It's mostly like one of the bridge levels, where you're running away from the cheap-cheeps that are popping out of the ground. And in this case, we have some wind along the way, but still a pretty cool level, one of my favorites for sure, as we make our way across. Relatively short level, though, unfortunately. As the level begins, you can drop down there and get a mushroom or firefly if you want, but we're going to continue along the way, watching out for the rotating flames that are moving at a pretty fast pace, as you can see during this level. Head along the top portion here, heading over to the right, drop on down to the single platform, and then jump across them carefully over to the right, waiting for the flames to pop out of the lava before attempting to make your jumps. Once you land safely here, you can run across this part, watching out for a few bullet bills along the way. Not too long after that, though, is Bowser. Take him out with a fire flower, or just run underneath of him, hit the axe, and move on to level B. B-1's a pretty straightforward level, just some busy beetles, Piranha Plants, Koopa Troopas, nothing too spectacular throughout the course of most of the level. Hanging across it as we get to this part here, watch out for the Piranha Plant, it's popping out, you can run across the bottom easily, or take over the plant itself. Unfortunately, I end up running into one of the Koopa Troopas and end up losing my special abilities. Wait for the right moments past the busy beetles and Piranha Plants and hit the flag and move on to B-2. As we begin B-2, we're going to start off heading through a bunch of blocks here through the center of it. It's pretty straightforward underwater themed level. There are some Koopa Troopas, but mostly bloopers that are going to try to get in our way. Head through a series of coral right afterwards. As long as we don't get sucked down into the pit below, it's a pretty easy area to kind of get past. After this, head on to the right, just ignore the coins above you, know something going up there, and then mash the swim button through the platforms here so that you're able to get across, watching out for the rotating flame and easily making it to the pipe at the end. B3 is another one of the tree-based levels, and this one has a series of relatively tough jumps for us to make early on. You can hit this block easily in order to grab a mushroom. Unfortunately, though, I end up missing it as we continue on through the stage. Hit the spring, and unfortunately, I don't quite make the jump up to the moving platform and end up losing the first life during the course of this run. Mario 2, aka The Lost Levels, is a really tough game, that is for sure, and I just end up losing a couple of lives during the course of it, but still, I'm able to make it through relatively easily. After losing that life, I come back and I'm able to just jump straight to the platform, just ignore the spring altogether, as I continue along my path, watching out for the bullet bills that are coming my way. After a series of jumps across the treetops, hitting the flag here, and moving on to the castle at B4. At the beginning of B4, watch out for a few small platforms we have to make our way across, watching out for some rotating flames across the next couple of jumps. Once here, you're going to make it this small platform, duck underneath of it as it goes across, and make it to the top portion. Once you make it to this part here, this is very similar to an area we did very early on in the game, but we're going to run across the bottom path. Just keep heading across the bottom. It seems like it's looping, but it's actually not. It's one of the ways the game plays a trick on you as you just keep on heading through, And eventually, you'll start seeing flames coming at your way, which signifies you're at the end of the level. C-1 is another one of the snow worlds, or at least start us off. Heading over to the right, watching out for the up and down moving red piranhas. We're going to wait for this Koopa Troopa to kind of get out of the path so that we're able to kind of jump up to the top platform here. After that, you have a bunch of Koopa Troopas jumping all around that little meadow right there before we head along the bottom portion here and jump up, cross the Piranha Plants, and continue on in the stage. It's pretty crowded during a lot of this level just due to all the Koopa Troopas and all the Piranha Plants. Make a big jump over to the right and use the Koopa Troopa to help you out by making it over the gap. Then you're going to have to wait once again for another Koopa Troopa to move upwards so that you can easily clear the next set of platforms and hit the flag. C2 is another one of the cheap bridge style of levels. It's a little bit more difficult though because the platforms are a little bit farther apart and we have to use more of the enemies kind of as platforms as we're making our way through, but it's still a pretty fun stage nonetheless. A lot of very single platforms, a lot of times like right here we have to use the Koopa Troopa to boost our way across. We're going to hit this giant green spring to move our way a little bit over to the right, but we don't want to go too far or else we may end up risking falling down into one of the many open pits before hitting the flag. C-3 is one of the more difficult stages in the game because it's all of the different springs as well as a giant amount of gaps. Basically, you just want to move a little bit at a time, land safely on another platform a little bit before hitting another spring. Overall, it may look a little bit easy just because, you know, just a lot of springs and such, but it still is a pretty tough level for sure. You want to make sure you don't go too far each time you end up hitting a spring, and then land safely so that you're able to hit another one before attempting another large gap. Here we have a couple of rotating flames, similar to an area we did earlier on in the game, before we hit the flag and move on to the castle at C4. C4 is very similar to a castle we did earlier on in the game, rotating flames to start us off, and then we're going to drop down to the moving back and forth platform, and then here we have the series of elevators we have to kind of maneuver around. Pretty tricky considering they're all moving down, so you got to move quickly, and then jumping up here, waiting for the flame to kind of come around, and then you can run across and watch out for all of the Koopa Troopas on these small platforms, hitting them before attempting to make it all the way across. Take the top platform again, watching out for the busy beetles below. You want to make sure you don't run down that bottom part. Now right here, it's nearly impossible to make it through this section without getting hit at least once. The first part, pretty easy, but the second one, you're going to probably end up getting hit. Once you're hit, just kind of continue on the level, bulldoze your way through the next series of platforms, watching out for the fire coming your way, get past Bowser, and finish up the stage. Onwards to the final world of the game, starting off with D1. This is a really tough level. Very beginning, you have a couple of Hammer Brothers, and then you gotta time it just right with the Koopa Troopa to make it over the gap here. The level doesn't get much easier though as you're continuing along the way, making it across a series of platforms, and then there's going to be more Hammer Brothers a little bit farther in, which unfortunately they end up nailing me with one of their hammers. Even after being a bit careful throughout the course of it, I just end up making a mistake and just cannot quite get by. There is the mushroom at the very beginning of this level, and you're able to free that, but trying to actually make it to that mushroom is really, really difficult. Most of the time, you just want to wait for the Koopa Troopa to get in that path the way you need it, and then just continue along the way, going past it, ignoring the mushroom all around. Using Mario, this level is a lot tougher for sure, because you're able to not make quite as high of jumps as you are traveling through. Here, I manipulate my way through the Hammer Brother just luckily enough to get past. It's really tough to do so, but either way, if you're able to finally make it past those Hammer Brothers, it's just a little bit longer before you hit the flag and move on to D2. As you make it into D2, start off by watching out for the Koopa Troopa above here. You can hit it down into that gap there and take out a whole bunch of busy beetles if you wanted to, but we're just going to ignore that and just continue along the way, watching out for the various Piranha Plants popping out of those pipes. Jump up to the top portion here if you like. You can watch out for some bullet bills and continue along the main course of the level. Relatively easy stage for the most part before we end up hitting the flag. Onwards to D-3, and this is a pretty tough stage. Drop down, make sure that you grab this mushroom in case you don't have any power-ups going into the level. There's a lot of Hammer Brothers throughout the course of this level. We're going to be jumping over a lot of them, as well as we can use these blocks to kind of help us, especially as Luigi, get up to the top platform if we want to. Thankfully, the one Hammer Brother is on the top already, so we're able to kind of just get past. We then have a long stretch, similar to 8-3 from Mario 1, where we have a lot of Hammer Brothers in a row that we're going to try to make these big jumps over them, sometimes ducking underneath bullet bills, but finally hitting the flag and moving on to D-4, the final level of Mario 2/Lost Levels. As D4 begins, we're going to head over to the right, watching out for some rotating flames. This is pretty much set up identically to the 8-4 castle, just with a different scheme overall. Instead of going down the one pipe, we're just going to continue on over to the right. Wait for the flames to kind of rotate here, and then continue along this bottom portion, and eventually making it to the pipe here. Once you head down to the pipe, you're going to come out to an outside area, watch out for the Hammer Brother right away, and then use the wind to your advantage to kind of keep platforming over to the right side. Climb up here, make a big leap over to the right, and then head down the next pipe. Once you're down here, you're going to head into an underground area, which is perfectly safe, full of coins, before going to the next pipe. Once you're out of the pipe, continue over to the right, watching out for the Bowser. Take the underneath path, ducking under the lip, and then continue along the path, jumping over the Hammer Brother waiting for you. The platform will pop out of the lava so that you can take the top platform, drop on down, get across the last bridge, and then hit the axe to finish up Super Mario Bros. 2. So there you guys have it, Super Mario Bros. 2, The Lost Levels, not only all the main worlds, but also the bonus levels as well. But with that, guys, I'm going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.